For decades, the FIFA World Cup has followed a specific formula. The same nations have dominated the World Cup, the same favourites have reached the latter stages of the World Cup, and every 4 years we'd all pretend and predict that someone new had a chance to win the World Cup. Before, it was Brazil, Germany, France or Argentina that had reminded everyone why football's biggest prize usually belongs to the biggest countries in the tournament. But not anymore, because the 2026 World Cup has completely changed what international football looks like. We've seen the giants collapse under pressure, we've seen the underdogs become global sensations. A tournament has expanded to 48 teams, somehow produced better stories than anyone had ever anticipated. And by the end of this video, you might just agree with me that we'll never see a World Cup in the same way again. When FIFA announced the tournament would expand from 32 teams to 48, people hated it. Fans said there would be too many weak teams, people thought the group stages would become meaningless, others claimed FIFA only cared about money. Honestly, those criticisms weren't even unreasonable. More teams usually means lower quality, at least that's what everyone assumed, when instead something completely different had happened. More countries meant more football cultures, more fans, more storylines, and nations that had spent decades watching from home that suddenly had the chance to prove themselves on the biggest stage in the world. That one decision completely changed the feel of the tournament. The World Cup belonged to countries that no one expected. Instead of only talking about the traditional superpowers, fans around the world found themselves falling in love with new teams that no one had ever heard of. Cape Verde became everyone's second favourite team, Morocco continued proving their 2022 run wasn't a fluke, Norway finally showed what a golden generation could actually achieve, and countries that would normally receive 5 minutes of television coverage in a World Cup suddenly dominated news headlines. And that's the magic of football. Not because they won every single game, but because people cared. Millions of neutral fans picked an underdog, and they stuck with them by their side. For years we've asked why international football sometimes feels predictable. This tournament gave us the answer to that. Football becomes special when people don't know what's coming next. But at the same time, some of the biggest names in football couldn't cope. Every World Cup creates disappointment, but this World Cup felt different. Heavy favourites disappeared far earlier than anyone had anticipated. Some never got going. Others simply underestimated opponents who refused to be intimidated by their presence. That's another consequence of expanding the competition. The gap between football's elites and everyone else started shrinking. Better coaching, better academies, players competing in Europe's biggest leagues. International football has never been more competitive than it is now, and that's terrifying if you're one of the traditional giants. One thing became obvious throughout the tournament: talent was everywhere. African nations looked fearless, Asian teams played without fear, and other sides showed that they're no longer just making up the numbers. The idea that only a handful of countries can realistically compete is starting to disappear. Football has become global in every sense of the word. 20 years ago, many players from smaller nations struggled to reach elite clubs. Now, they're playing in the Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, Serie A, Champions League. That experience comes back with them, and national teams benefit from that massively. Another reason this World Cup felt different: it wasn't on the pitch, it was online. Every single goal that happened became a TikTok, every single upset from the World Cup became a meme, every unknown player became famous overnight. Fans weren't just watching the matches anymore, they were experiencing the tournament together. A wonder goal would spread across the world within minutes of it happening. An emotional celebration could reach millions before the match had even finished. Football isn't consumed like it was back in 2014, or even 2022. This World Cup became the internet's tournament. Let's be honest, FIFA doesn't exactly have the greatest reputation. So when they announced a bigger World Cup, most people expected disaster. But here's the strange part: it actually worked. More nations meant more fans meant better atmosphere, more stories meant more memorable moments. Of course, there's still some criticism to go with this. The schedule's demanding, players play more matches than ever, and there are questions about whether expansion should continue. But one thing is undeniable: the football world is talking about more countries than ever before, and that is good for football. Here's what I think changes forever. The next generations of footballers growing up in countries like Cape Verde or Curacao or Uzbekistan will watch this tournament believing something they may have never believed before: we can actually do this. Belief changes everything in football. Every great football nation starts somewhere. Someone had to be the first generation to dream. The 2026 World Cup may have created thousands of those dreams, and if it did, the biggest impact of this tournament won't be felt today. It will be felt in 10, 20, 30 years time. This wasn't wasn't just another World Cup. It wasn't just about lifting a trophy. It showed that footballers' balance of power is changing, the Giants no longer guaranteed success, underdogs are no longer happy just to participate, and the rest of the world in football has finally caught up. Now maybe this wasn't the greatest World Cup ever, but it might be the most important one we've ever seen. So what do you think? Has the 2026 World Cup changed football forever? Or is this just a one-off? Let me know your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.